class, let's just take a little bit of time to talk about your upcoming results and discussion section. This is going to focus primarily on the results section because this is where things get a little bit confusing. So here's Qualtrics. I'm sure you have all looked at Qualtrics and you've opened it up, you've written your survey, hopefully you've collected a lot of data, and now you're getting ready to close the survey. Go ahead and close the survey sometime this weekend. Once that's closed, you're going to want to download your raw data. So one of the ways you do that, well, the way you do that is click on your survey, share report, and then export raw data. It'll help you download a CSV file, which can be analyzed in JASP. But here's a couple of things. As you can see, Qualtrics actually does a lot of this analysis for you. It's built you this handy dandy chart. It has these frequency tables for you right here. And it should go question by question with that relevant information. See, here's some rank, things like that. So you are welcome to take the information directly from Qualtrics if you choose to do so, or you are welcome to head on over to JASP and have a little bit of fun with the data. However, one thing to note, if you do decide to head on over to JASP, which you probably should do, you are going to need to clean your data first. So what does that mean? When you download your raw data, you have some confusing things. For example, you would not have these at the top, these things that are difficult to see. You would not have data labels. So it would say question 2, question 3, question 4, but you don't really know what those questions relate to, which becomes really, really confusing when you put it in JASP. That means in order to understand what question 3 is, every single time you would have to go back to the survey. And that would be very time consuming and very annoying to you. So what you're going to want to do as you're cleaning your data is you're going to want to take your survey. Here's my survey right here. You're going to take your survey and you are going to code the questions. So what do I mean by code the questions? Here's my survey, and here, I hope, are my survey codes. What does that mean? Well, these survey codes correspond with every single question. So this is what essentially becomes my new variable name, assuming I can get this screen to the right size. So instead of writing out question number 1, it's lost. Okay, so instead of writing out question number 1, which asks in this survey about your prior physical activity, prior for college, I would code it. So now it says Q1 PC exercise. Then I'd come up with some sort of code to go with question 2. In this case, Q2 college exercise, and so on down the line. Then when you get it in JASP, you can see that in JASP it says this at the top. In order to make it say this at the top in the easiest possible way, you are going to need to clean that data in Excel. Yes, it can be done in JASP. No, it is not easier to do it there. So I highly recommend that before you import your data into JASP, you delete all of the things you don't need. Qualtrics gives you a number of really weird... Qualtrics gives you a number of really strange things when you when you download the raw data. This is what your Qualtrics will look like in numbers, apparently. This is what your Qualtrics data will look like. So you have all of these extra columns that are just confusing. You don't need to know when they started it. You don't need to know when they ended it. You don't need to know the response type, any of these things, recorded date, recipient, last name, any of those things. So you're going to want to delete all of those irrelevant columns and rows. For example, this is just confusing and this is just confusing. So you just have the raw data you need, and it should look something like this. Yes, it is still confusing, but it will be less confusing once you put it into JASP. So here we have it in JASP. The other thing you're going to want to do is You may, for example, let's see if we can find our example again. You may, for example, have had several questions that are just a little bit confusing. Where the answers, when you see them in Excel and then initially when you see them in JASP, are just ones, twos, threes, etc. You will want to change those as well. As you may remember from the JASP assignment we did this week, the one that had to do with gym preference and BYU Idaho students, you are going to have to change your data labels. So for example, question 16, 1 is finance, 2 is work study, 3 is medical, 4 is family, 5 is location. Yes, I could leave that 1 through 5, but no, it will not be easier when I analyze my data. So as you're setting up your JASP file, you cannot do this in Excel. You have to do this in JASP. As you set up your JASP file, you're going to want to go through and make those changes to your labels. See, for example, now instead of saying 1 equals 1, now 1 equals finance. 2 doesn't equal 2, it equals work study. So when you start to run the analysis, it makes a bit more sense. It's easier to interpret the data if you take those steps up front. Now, that being said, you could just go through Qualtrics, which will do a lot of that for you. As you can see, Qualtrics isn't asking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are remembering the labels. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But when you are downloading it into Excel, it probably is going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You'll have to go back to your original survey and decide what 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 equal. It is a little bit confusing. It will take you some time. It's not necessarily difficult, but it's going to take you some time. So once you have set up your data, you need to start running your analysis. I highly recommend that you run your frequency analysis in JASP in addition to looking at it in Qualtrics. The reason why is you might want to import some of that data into Excel to build some tables, and it is a little bit more difficult if you haven't already run the data analysis, or you can run it directly from Excel. You'll see that Qualtrics has all these charts and tables in it. These are not great. They are good for you to look at, but they will not copy and paste well into your reports. This will become distorted. This formatting will be incorrect. If you choose charts and tables, you will want to build them yourself in Excel because they will look better and your grade will be better if you choose to do that. And we want good grades because that's why we're doing this, right? So make sure that any charts and tables that you absolutely want to build are either built in JASP. If it's a table, for example, if you're looking at a correlation matrix, it would be just fine to take directly what they have from JASP. Make sure you add all those APA formatting conventions to it and include it directly in your report. If you are including a graph, something like a pie chart or a bar graph, you will want to build that in Excel. The reason is because when you build it in Excel, you will be able to adjust everything so that it looks much better than if you were to just take directly from this, because this will become distorted and or blurry. And JASP, as you saw with the assignment this week, JASP doesn't have the best graphics capabilities. So you've analyzed your data. What do I mean by analyze your data? I mean you answered your research questions. Have those research questions out in front of you as you are doing this assignment. Don't assume that you will remember what the research questions are, because you won't. Because you won't remember them correctly. Because you will get distracted, interrupted. It will not make as much sense. Please, please, please make sure that you have those research questions in front of you. The first section of that results assignment is going to be the demographic information. What do I mean by the demographic information? I mean that you are going to adequately describe who answered your survey. That is not listed as part of the rubric, but it is implied running throughout the rubric. You cannot organize your results in a logical manner unless you know who answered your survey. You cannot provide adequate numeric data unless we know who answered your survey. So this is what your beginning of your results section is going to look like. We're always going to use the running head, all those important things. Then see this nifty little paragraph here. It describes who answered the survey. Why is that important? Well, if I say 56% of females and 44% of males said this, well, that's all fine and dandy. But what if I had 500 respondents, 2 of which were male and the rest are female? Well, then that percentage of male respondents becomes a lot less important. The results just aren't valid. You need to know how many people responded to your survey in total and then start to break it down so we understand the context behind them. So in this case, we start by saying how many people completed the survey, and then this is age information followed by gender distribution, marital status, place of dwelling, campus versus online students, and then a further breakdown of that. So here's the marital status by type of student and gender distribution by type of student. The reason that you want some of this information is you're starting to build your case for the discussion section. In the discussion section, you're going to talk about the so what. So we've reported these results. Awesome. People said this. Okay, well, why might our results say that? Well, in this case, I might say that people reported these levels of nutrition. It might not be accurate for the entire student population, but because the majority of our respondents reside away from their parents and haven't lived with them for a while, maybe the parental impact is less. Things like that. This is where you're starting to build that case where you are saying, we found this. That may be caused by this. In order to introduce those extra factors that may be impacting your results, you need to introduce them here. Typically, they are the factors that are going to allow you to break your results into different groups. So gender, age, marital status, school level of school, type of student, all of those things you want to introduce here because that's how we're going to start to create our groups. Then, I highly recommend, though this is entirely up to your personal preference, that you list your research question. If you have more than one research question, if you have more than one section to your research question, if you have one of those 2-part research questions, I recommend that you put that right here. Why? Because this draws the reader's attention right back to what you are trying to say, and it keeps you on task. So in this case, there were 2 research questions. The first is, what are the perceived impacts on nutrition change and physical activity change before and during college life? These research questions and the data were taken directly from a previous research paper for Health Science 391. You'll notice that there are some problems with this paper, and there are some significant problems with the way the research questions were written. I've gone through and I've done the analysis on this particular paper, but I kept their original research questions. So if you're wondering why the wording is confusing, it's just gone through a lot of iterations, and this was written by some students. But as you can see, an imperfect research question can lead to good analysis. So then we go through all of these things that are necessary to answer the research question. I do recommend that you read some of this. It's not the most thrilling read ever, but it gives you an idea of how the language should be set up and some of the transitions from what you're reporting in the statistics to these charts, tables, and figures. In this case, I felt as I was going through that it would be better to show you what I meant rather than tell you. In some cases, you're going to find that it's easier to just tell what you mean rather than show it. You don't have to have a chart, table, graph, figure, whatever you want to call it, for every single statistic or every single research question. You can be very successful for this assignment and not include any charts, tables, graphs, figures, but you may want to use them. Sometimes visual representations are better. As you can see, this is an APA format. This is an APA format. And also, as you can see, this was built in Excel. It was not built in JASP. It was not built in Qualtrics. And the reason for that is this allows you a lot more formatting options. I can shrink this. make it bigger, change the fonts, things like that, nothing becomes blurry. So I highly recommend, if you do choose to use graphics, that you build them in Excel if possible. So this continues to go through, answering the research question, additional chart, table, graph, figure. Here's the second research question and the corresponding information that goes with it. You will notice that for this particular example, I did not use any correlation statistics. We didn't go through that correlation matrix or anything of that nature, and that's just the way that their research questions were written, and the survey questions, they didn't lend themselves to answering the research question that way. However, you may choose to do that. You know how to run through a correlation matrix. We did that example in the homework from this week. You can either just include the information as shown in the JASP example that I provided in the class announcements, or you may want to include the whole table. Remember that you do have a somewhat limited amount of space, so you're going to want to choose the most important things. And while you do have a lot of space here, you are going to have significantly less space in the final paper. So let's talk a little bit about the discussion section. I don't have an example of this in here, but the discussion section is the so what. This is where you're going to say why your results matter. Here you're just going to say the results are. So here I say, well, exercise was negatively impacted by a college enrollment. The impact of college enrollment on nutritional practices was mixed. Here's the table that corresponds with that. But we don't know why. Okay, this happened, but why? The discussion section is the but why section. You're going to talk about, well, maybe living with other people has an impact on it. Maybe being married has an impact on your nutritional choices. Maybe proximity to a grocery store. All of those things, we're going to start to explore those in the discussion section. You're also going to talk about how your findings relate to previous research. So you're going to start tying it back to the lit review, and you're going to use citations. Anytime you're tying it back to something else, you must include a citation, or you are plagiarizing, and that is not a great thing. Also in the discussion section, you're going to discuss your study's strengths and weaknesses. So there are strengths to your study, but there are most definitely weaknesses. This is your opportunity to explain what those are, acknowledge them, and how to prevent them in the future. You also need to talk about future research. So you found this. Is this a new finding? If so, what does that mean for future researchers? If it's not, then why didn't you find new information? Are you just validating previous information, which is great? Or did something go awry with your particular study? Whatever the answer is, you need to start to talk about that. Remember that you must use correct spelling, proper grammar, punctuation, and you must use APA format. It's not a choice. I highly recommend that you download that template that we are using for the final report. Delete all of the parts you don't need for this section. You do not need the references for this section. You do not need an abstract for this section. You don't need the part that says methods. You don't need the part that says introduction. You only need the results. As part of that, you also need this. Yay, the running head and the page numbers. You do need that. You do need 12-point font. You do need 1-inch margins. You do need Times New Roman font, even though it is the most boring font available. Please use it so I can give you credit on that, because your results paper is worth 65 points. 5 points are due to the formatting, and 6 points are due to the grammar and punctuation. That's 11 points out of 65 that I really hope everyone gets, because some of these other sections are a little bit more complicated. Please make sure that you do it correctly. Also, we talked about how you don't have to include figures, but please, please, please make sure that if you do choose to include figures, which you most likely will, that you format that correctly. The information can be completely wrong, though please make your information be completely right, but it can be formatted beautifully and you will get 5 points. That's 16 points out of 65. That's a lot of points due just to the formatting. Please pay attention. Please, please, please pay attention to the formatting. Let me know if you have any questions about your results section. Remember, you are going to want to clean that data before you put it into JASP, or you're going to be really angry once you put it in JASP and it looks confusing, and then you're going to clean it. Let's clean first. Use all of the tools that you can find in Qualtrics that you feel are available. You have everything from frequencies to crosstabs available to you in Qualtrics. There are some tutorial videos available online that can help you with that, or please reach out to me if you have any questions. Also, as you're going through this data analysis, your group members, former group members, are a great resource. Please turn to them and ask them questions, because they are looking at the exact same data set, and they probably either have those questions too, or have had those questions and worked through them already. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.